Welcome to the Vitamin Professor podcast, brought to you by VRM Media, publisher of Vitamin Retailer and Nutrition Industry Executive magazines, in partnership with Nutraland USA. I'm your host, Dr. Bruno, Professor Emeritus of Nutraceutical Science and Chief Scientific Officer of Nutraland USA. Now, the purpose of this podcast is to help educate the dietary supplement industry about the science of nutraceuticals and other relevant topics. If you like what you hear and see, don't forget to like and subscribe. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest today, Dr. Edward Dosz. He is a food scientist with a PhD in food science from the University of Illinois. He specialized in bioactives from plants, and he's made significant contributions in the field, exploring just the remarkable potential of these compounds and their ability to enhance human health. With a decade of experience in the supplement industry, Dr. Doz's passion for nutrition and fitness has driven him to develop science-based solutions that empower individuals to lead healthier lives. And now, as the Vice President of Science and Innovation at NutriScience Innovations, he heads the development of functional, clinically validated ingredients that make a positive impact on people's well-being. Driven by a personal commitment to active lifestyle, Dr. Dosz exemplifies his dedication to health and fitness. Today, Dr. Dosz will be talking to us about Butyragen from NutriScience Innovations. Welcome, Dr. Dosz.
Thank you so much for that introduction. That made me feel very nice. Really appreciate being on your show. I'm a big fan.
Thank you.
Catch most of your episodes. You have on very high quality people that share information very well.
Thank you very much. And today we have another high quality person to share information well. So listen, why don't we just start with the most obvious question? What is Butyragen?
Sure. Great question. So it's NutriScience's innovative complex, which is a direct butyrate generator ingredient designed to support not only gut health, but whole body well-being. So it's primarily composed of tributyrin, as well as some very popular prebiotic fibers, sun fiber, as well as acacia fiber.
Oh, okay. Very good. Okay, so, I've read a few different pieces, some papers and stuff on this material. And so what I'd like to ask you to explain is, why is butyrate important for gut and systemic health? And how does Butyragen help deliver it more effectively?
Sure, that's a great question. Butyrate has a plethora of science behind it, and it's continuously growing. At the top level, a lot of people think butyrate is the primary energy source of your colonocytes. So it's acting as an energy source for your colon. But on top of that, it's also kind of promoting mucosal integrity. It's stimulating tight junctions. I know the phrase leaky gut is thrown around a lot.
Yep.
But it's really helping maintain that epithelial barrier and helping with intestinal permeability. That's really just at the top level what people are typically thinking. It also has a lot of anti-inflammatory effects. So it's a very potent HDAC inhibitor, and that's histone deacetylase for people who aren't sure what HDAC is. Can help with gut motility, metabolic regulation, and it has some neuroprotective effects on top of that, which I'm sure we'll dive a little deeper in gut-brain axis as we move forward. But what really sets this apart is the fact that it's a direct butyrate generator.
Okay, so how does it do that? How does it generate butyrate?
Sure, absolutely. So you're consuming tributyrin as well as these prebiotic fibers, and in your small intestine, you have lipases, digestive enzymes that are present. What that's essentially doing is cleaving the glycerol backbone off of tributylin. So you're getting glycerol that's going to continue down, moving to your large intestine, where you'll probably produce short chain fatty acids from its fermentation. And you're also getting 3 butyrate molecules for every molecule of tributylin you're consuming. That's the tri and tributylin being released in your small intestine.
Interesting. So, in reading some of the materials prior to this, I think this is something you wrote. I think you said that, Butyragen works regardless of someone's microbiome state. So, can you explain to our listeners why that's important?
Absolutely. Just using both of us as an example, our microbiome does not look the same. So our ability to produce short chain fatty acids from fermentation, which is really how people are primarily producing short chain fatty acids, is different. The older someone gets, the more impacted their microbiome can become.
Right.
And not only that, but some people their microbiome, their digestive system may be colonized by bacteria that are not very efficient at fermenting fibers, which would impact how much short chain fatty acids, including butyrate, they could produce. So taking that out of the equation potentially brings a lot of benefit for an older population, a more sedentary population, as well as people who aren't typically consuming large amounts of dietary fiber. Some people can't have 4 or 5 grams of inulin without having more negative effects than they're having positive effects.
No, it's true with prebiotics. They can do wonderful things for you, but a lot of people have a sensitivity to it, and it can cause some gut, transitory but still gut distress that happens. So for sure. Okay, that's a good point. Now, the next question is a very broad one, and it covers different areas, but it's my favorite part. I want to have you discuss a little bit about the science behind Butyragen. Basically, what is it doing for people, and what is the science showing about this?
That's a great question, and probably my favorite question that you're going to ask.
Yeah, my favorite one to ask.
And that's primarily because the timing worked out really well here. We just had a gold standard, so a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trial published. It's an open access journal, Nutraceuticals, where we had a starting population of 596 individuals.
Yeah, good end size there.
Yes, which is great because this was a virtually conducted trial, so your attrition rate can be a little variable in those situations. And we had some really meaningful, fantastic results. The overall population, men and women combined, experienced a pretty significant, or they showed an 18% more likely chance of having an improvement in belly pain compared to placebo. The population that was recruited had voiced an interest in improving their digestive well-being. So these are not people who were clinically diagnosed with any issues, because this is the supplement industry. We want to be cognizant of those regulations. And then, digging a little deeper into some subgroup analysis, we saw an even greater improvement in female participants, and an even greater improvement again in postmenopausal women. So you're really seeing, we saw an 18% improvement in the overall population, men and women combined. Moving into women in general, we had over 20% improvement. And then again, moving into postmenopausal, greater than 26% improvement in belly pain, which is fantastic.
That's really interesting because, in my 46 years in the industry, I think I can count on one hand studies I've seen that specifically addressed belly pain using the terminology belly pain. I have not seen that as a common thing, which makes it very interesting. I'm a chief scientific officer of a raw material company, but I do a lot of formulating for different brands. And I've had people ask about what they can do to help with that kind of situation or what can be included. And, a lot of the stuff that I did was some of the usual suspects, including probiotics and what have you. But it's very interesting to see that you had something here that really addressed that. And given today's diet, how so many people eat, and the stress they have, and all the different things that impact gut health and gut functionality and belly, your people are having that issue of belly pain. So to see that there's something that specifically addresses that, that's pretty cool.
And it's not, belly. A lot of people think belly pain, they think low. Now, the clinical definition of belly pain is actually chest to groin.
Yeah.
Is really where this definition falls, and it kind of leads to some other statistically significant findings we had.
Yeah.
So another since this was a virtual study, we used validated questionnaires.
Right.
And primarily the PROMISE questionnaires.
I'm very familiar.
where the individual questions are also validated. But something else we looked at was a digestive quality of life index, so a DQLQ. Now, participants, males and females, that had reported normal to mild levels of reflux and normal to mild levels of constipation experienced improvements in their DQLQ scores, significant improvements in their DQLQ scores. So that's really showing both an upper and a lower benefit, GI benefit. You're talking about reflux, which is typically like an acid reflux, where you're feeling you're feeling how thin your mucosal layer is in your esophagus, and then constipation. So this was really it's a great finding for us, and really shows the not just digestive, but what people would pull out of digestive and say potential whole body benefits.
Absolutely. So it seems to me, again, I'm putting my formulator hat on because I can't help but do that. It seems to me that this material could have a range of potential applications for digestive health, certainly, but there are products out there that are more geared towards lower digestive health, those that are geared more towards upper digestive health. And it seems that this particular material could be applicable in both of those situations quite nicely.
Yeah.
No, I think that's absolutely fascinating.
We've talked about your formulator hat a few times, and I really like this aspect. A lot of people think, oh, we did this clinical study, and that's you don't normally start with a human clinical study. There's a cost implication that comes with that. So you normally start at a smaller level. So
pilot study, open label.
Yeah, absolutely. And where we started with this, we did some ex vivo research on human stool, where we were looking at butyrate production from the 200 milligram dose of Butyragen versus some other common things. For example, inulin, which I brought up earlier. To 200 milligrams of Butyragen produces as much butyrate as 4 grams of inulin. If I took 4 grams of inulin, you would not want to be, you'd be happy this was a virtually conducted podcast and I wasn't sitting in the same room with you.
Oh, absolutely. I will tell you that many years ago, it's not inulin, but, fructooligosaccharides, I had a great nephew who had some genetic problems that caused him to have a lot of gut distress and constipation. And he was, at the time, an infant, and he they were having a heck of a time, even with his pediatrician, to try to find something that was going to be safe to give him to help with this. And so my sister called me and asked about it. And I said, you know what? I think it would be reasonably safe to try some, fructooligosaccharides with him, because you give a certain amount, and especially if the person's not used to it, a laxative effect does take place.
Yeah.
And the good news is it worked very well in his case, and that was effective. But the problem is, if you don't have a specific issue of that nature and you're taking a prebiotic, you got to be aware it can have, especially initially, some effects on your gut that you may not be prepared for. So if you can sort of mitigate that with the use of something that doesn't have that same effect. Now, okay, this is just a little off the subject, not really off the subject, but a little bit off the subject.
Fine.
I see in some of the literature that this is referred to as kind of a prebiotic, and certainly you have prebiotics in there. But in a way, I kind of also think of it as a postbiotic, because, butyric acid butyrate is a metabolite.
Yes.
Of probiotics, and it can be argued that you can define in the industry, people will define a postbiotic in two ways: either as metabolites of postbiotics, or as a pasteurized or otherwise heat-treated probiotic. And so when I first heard about this material a few years back, in fact, it was at Expo West, talking to your VP of sales, who I know very well. He was telling me about it, and and he referred to it as a prebiotic. I said, wait a minute, that's butyric acid. Don't you mean a postbiotic? And so I posed that to you. What are your thoughts on prebiotic, postbiotic?
So I'd say by definition, and this doesn't really work in the supplement industry, Butyragen would almost be like a pro-drug.
Yeah.
Because you're taking Tributyrin. Tributyrin itself is not a postbiotic,
right,
but the butyrate is the postbiotic. So it doesn't quite...
Okay, good point.
Exact definition. So we're really positioning it as a novel prebiotic.
Yeah,
Because there's so much new data coming out about polyphenols that function as prebiotics.
Absolutely.
And amino acids functioning as
Sure.
prebiotics. So especially now that we have the positive result showing that we do have this biological effect, we feel that it checks the boxes for a novel prebiotic, and I think that's the hill we're going to stand on here. But I agree with you. When I first started at NutriScience, I immediately kind of dived right into our science that was ongoing or in the planning stages, and I had the exact same thought that you just highlighted of it's not the clearest cut fit for
right.
any of these normal nutraceutical categories. And through the research we've conducted, I've kind of decided novel prebiotic is the neatest fit.
Well, to your point, because you have probiotics in there, prebiotics in there, it clearly is a prebiotic ingredient, and because what it contains isn't butyrate per se, but a compound that can yield it, it's not technically a postbiotic either. So the thing that best describes it is, I think, what you said. It's a novel type of prebiotic. Yeah.
And it's fantastic. I'm very happy it doesn't contain butyrate or butyric acid.
Oh yeah,
there's that, and this is back to your formulation point, because at the end of the day, you want people to want to use this, and you want people to reliably consume it. So you look at something like sodium butyrate. Absolutely, you're consuming butyrate, therefore it's butyrate. The difficulty is the taste is horrendous, the smell is horrendous, and with Tributyrin, we're not just using any Tributyrin. We have like a double vacuum distillation process to make sure any residual butyrate or butyric acid is removed. So you're really dealing with something that has a neutral aroma, greatly cuts down on the taste, and with the 200 milligram dose, I would immediately think put it in a capsule, personally.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. That makes a great deal of sense. I wonder, again, formulator hat, if it's possible to do something like this if you combine it with the right type of things in some other delivery form. I don't know, maybe a gummy is not the best form, but potentially you could do something maybe even with a chewable or a fast melt or something if you use some strong flavoring agents, maybe a little bit of, bitter masking or that sort of thing. I don't know. It's possible. Definitely a capsule would be good.
Oh, it definitely a capsule. And what you're speaking to is something we're also actively working on. We're trying to do some of the legwork for end users, so they wouldn't have to worry about all of the masking and issues that would go into covering up a relatively neutral flavor, but undeniably still a flavor.
Yeah.
So just to make life easier, and this product it combines so well with so many things, and we've looked at some probiotics in combination, something like LGG, where we're looking at butyrate production as well, and we really find that individually we do okay, but in combination you almost have a 1 + 1 = 3 effect.
Nice, truly synergistic.
Absolutely, and it's great to see just the water activity of this product is also very, very low. So it works wonderfully with probiotics and doesn't really change your shelf life, which is a big consideration when people are putting in crazy overages to not have to make those accommodations just because you're combining it with another ingredient.
Yeah, I remember early in my career on some probiotics, when I was formulating some probiotics, and the raw material supplier recommended a 5 times overage. I'm like, what? it was a little bit crazy, but this seems like a pretty cool ingredient, and I'm guessing that it's relatively stable.
It is quite stable. We have real-time and accelerated study that shows, I believe we're at a 3-year shelf life right now.
That's fantastic, because if you got 24 months, that's kind of what the expectation is. Anything more than that is gravy, man.
Icing on the cake.
Icing on the cake. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the gut health benefits. Are there any other potential benefits associated with Butyragen besides?
There are. I'm not going to go too deep into it because I feel like I'd be giving away something that's in the works. But I will say that butyrate has some very early significant results for having an impact on the gut-brain axis.
Okay.
And butyrate can cross the blood-brain barrier.
Okay.
That is known in science. That's not like I'm not saying anything surprising. So with its ability to act as an HDAC inhibitor, helping reduce neuroinflammatory action, we're seeing some. I'll say we're seeing some behavior and mood changes that have been seen in rodents before. But that's something we're actively working on, looking at impact on stress and depression symptoms.
Interesting.
Things of that level. I know. People are very interested in GLP-1 right now. Obviously,
indeed they are. Yes.
It's overwhelming sometimes to see how interested people are.
Well, did you attend Natural Products Expo West this last March?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So back in, I want to say, was it 2019? I think if you went there, we called it the CBD show because everything was CBD.
I remember when it was the CBD show for a few years.
And I won't say that this last show was the GLP-1 show, but it was partially that. I mean, there was so many companies that were introducing products that were in some way, shape, or form related to GLP-1. So I'm sorry. Please continue with your discussion about Butyragen and GLP-1.
So butyrate does promote the secretion of of things like GLP-1. But the other useful aspect is the significant effects we've had from this clinical study support a lot of the negative effects people who are taking GLP-1 medication report experiencing. So you have people that are experiencing significant belly pain to a point where they don't want to continue taking GLP-1. So having that potential benefit of reducing belly pain, reducing some quality of life issues that come along with digestive issues, very, very beneficial in that space. And some of the findings obviously the clinical study we had recruited I think it was 68% females to participate in this study, because it's pretty known in the industry now that women were not being included in clinical studies at a fair, equal level.
Right.
We wanted to make sure that wasn't the case in this study. And we saw all these improvements that were highlighted and increased in female participants. And especially in postmenopausal female participants. So that really got us thinking about the potential benefits to the estrobolome, which is really your body's way, the microbiota in your body that are responsible for reactivating and absorbing estrogen to bring it back into circulation or to prevent that from happening. So we're hypothesizing that we might have kind of a normalizing effect on the estrobolome, which is why postmenopausal women experienced a greater improvement than the average participant.
There's some interesting directions you could go with that.
There is, and these are all things we're thinking about and talking about right now. We really, the world's our oyster when it comes to Butyragen. We think we really have something exciting here, and the market demand now that we have the clinical study is picking up. So we're happy to see it, and the better it does, the more likely you are to continue doing your research.
Exactly. I just want to also add that, and I'm sure you've seen this too, a lot of times when you get a raw material in the market, studies will be done on it, but oftentimes the studies are kind of all over the board with regard to dosage levels, so that when the supplement brand wants to formulate something, they're like, what dose do I use? Or some of the doses are really, really high, and it's like, I can't use that dose, it's too high. And I'm just very pleased to see that the dose of 200 milligrams appears to be an effective dose, and the study you don't have all these different dose levels to try to effectuate. That's one of the good things that some of my other favorite raw materials on the market they're good at is they use a certain dose, they stick with it, and do all their studies on it. So you can work on that. So I'm glad to see that you guys use that 200 milligrams. That's
thank
nice.
you for pointing that out. I appreciate you acknowledging that, and that's the point of the preclinical work. The preclinical work helps you determine that dose. We had some C. elegans model animal work, which is just like a worm. I mean, look, it's really a muscle fiber with a digestive system. And that's a good description for a C. elegans model. That really, we were looking at reduction in oxidative stress in those cases, and that helped us determine this 200 milligram human equivalent dose that we did in the study, and we carried that over, and we have no plans on changing that. It's a very easy to format, work with dose.
No, absolutely. Similarly, a material that my company has, we did a human pilot, but we did it a couple different dosage levels. We found the one that really was the correct one. So now as we move forward with larger randomized controlled trials, we know what dose to focus on, and we're using that one. So that's cool.
That's the way to do it.
Right, that makes sense. So, okay. Could you explain, you did this a little bit, but let's maybe just a little more. Could you explain how Butyragen compares to fiber fermentation, or even, and you kind of did this a little already, or direct butyrate consumption in terms of effectiveness.
Sure.
Fiber, direct, or Butyragen.
Sure, absolutely. So a few different ways, realistically. Fiber, you run into the issue of, are you going to digest it the same as I'm going to digest it? Are we both getting the same effect from this material? Maybe, maybe not. Probably not. And that's limiting. A lot of people will take probiotics, and you can absolutely take probiotics that you can look up on the label. Obviously, these would be short-chain fatty acid promoting probiotics. That doesn't mean they're going to colonize your gut. Just because you're taking them, or maybe you take them, you stop taking them, and you think that's what's there now. It doesn't always work that way. So a lot of fiber that would have the most benefit in terms of producing short-chain fatty acids, butyrate specifically, green bananas. I don't know about you. I'm not a big green banana guy.
No.
Resistant starches, so things like cooked and cooled potatoes. I enjoy a potato salad. I'm not going to lie to you. I like a good potato salad, but I don't eat it all the time either.
No.
So taking the microbiome out of the equation, not needing to worry about taking probiotics every day and hoping to colonize your digestive system, taking something that is broken down with digestive enzymes that you're producing in your pancreas, they're located in your small intestine, and even to a smaller extent in your large intestine, to cleave that glycerol backbone and form your 3-butyrates is a better way to do it. And then with the sodium butyrate, obviously you're running into this issue with maybe not having the best delivery system, because you're now also going to go through your stomach, and it's going to make some changes to that butyrate depending on where butyrate's released. It can be butyrate or butyric acid. So if it was released in your stomach, it's likely going to be butyric acid at that point. The taste, people are hesitant to consume regular fish oil because of those fishy burps. If you're consuming sodium butyrate, God bless you.
For sure.
It's a very potent aroma. It's a very potent taste. This product's really delivering butyrate in your small intestine, working through your large intestine. Realistically, it's likely primarily being absorbed in your small intestine, going through first pass metabolism, circulating throughout your body. Anything that doesn't get absorbed in your small intestine is going to make its way to your colon with the prebiotic fibers and the glycerol, where they're going to ferment and likely form other short-chain fatty acids or some more butyrate. So you're getting this lower GI benefit as well as this potential systemic benefit from Butyragen.
Makes sense. That's a good answer to that question. Now, earlier we talked about Butyragen and we talked about a little bit about synergies. Can you tell us how Butyragen works with probiotics with regard to any known synergies?
Sure. So obviously, when you're dealing with probiotics, you're trying to help repopulate beneficial microbes in your microbiome. Butyragen's ensuring a steady supply of butyrate. A lot of those microbes actually can feed on butyrate, and then you're producing other short-chain fatty acids that are cross-feeding other microorganisms.
Okay.
So you potentially have this. It's really a dual approach where you're strengthening your gut barrier function and also helping maintain a well-balanced microbiome ecosystem.
Okay, that makes a great deal of sense. And honestly, it's one of the first things I thought of when I again, wearing my formulator's hat, thinking about the use of Butyragen together in products that might have probiotics, might have prebiotics, might have postbiotics as part of a whole complex to make it a much more comprehensive formula to achieve those gut health end goals. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Now, speaking of which, to your mind, what populations or what consumer groups would potentially benefit the most from Butyragen?
Sure. You know, I would say individuals that are consuming low fiber diets, and whether that be for financial reasons, they're just not consuming a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables, things of that nature, or they don't like the taste or like the effects of those high fiber foods. Older population who experiences decrease in microbiome diversity because it's naturally declining with age, and then people who are seeking gut support, whether that be in times of stress or travel. I know personally myself, I always experience some digestive upset when I'm traveling for work or going on a vacation. The times you really don't want to be experiencing digestive upset, and now with this new clinical study, I would also say women and postmenopausal women.
Yeah, it makes good sense.
They might have some enhanced benefits.
Yeah, that makes great sense. So here's maybe I don't know if it's the best question, but it's the last question, and I think it's an important question. Safety. Can you address the safety of Butyragen? Is it grass? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. So we also started with a preclinical study before we did this full clinical study, and the preclinical study was also placebo controlled, and what it was really looking at was helping determine the mechanism of action, making sure we had the right dose, but also looking at safety. So in terms of adverse events, there was no statistical significance, any difference between adverse events of the placebo group, which is really just a cellulose capsule, as opposed to Butyragen in either the preclinical or the clinical study. All the ingredients in Butyragen have a defined regulatory status and can be sold, but we went above and beyond with that, and we also did an independent GRAS review and have a self-affirmed GRAS on Butyragen as a whole. So it's a very safe. With the most common side effect I think seen in the most recent clinical study was very sporadic, occasional upset stomach, but that was seen in the placebo group and the active group.
Right. So it
was a 6-week study. This wasn't just like a 1-week thing.
Right.
I will say we did experience some significance at 1 week, with the highest level of significance seen by week 5. But in 6 weeks, the likelihood that you're going to have an upset stomach due to some unknown reason is very high.
Right. And given that you saw all these benefits for, belly pain, etc., I mean, I'm not personally, that doesn't concern me very much. No.
These were people that wanted something to help improve their digestive and GI tract to begin with. So they might have been, they were really people with self-reported digestive issues. So it makes perfect sense that somewhere in those 6 weeks they were going to have something wrong. And the fact that the placebo group experienced the same level of those occurrences, very confidence inducing.
Very good. Well, I said that was going to be the last question, but it's not. I thought of something else. So, just, from your perspective, if you were to be formulating a product for gut health, let's call it gut comfort, okay? And you said, my number one choice is going to be Butyragen. But if you needed to include, one or more other nutraceuticals, what would be your choice to include together with Butyragen?
I'm going to sound like I'm advertising for the company instead of
being
a partial person. We have another ingredient that's very focused on digestive well-being. It's called Pepsin GI.
Oh, I know it well.
It's a zinc L-carnitin.
Yeah, I've formulated with it in the past.
Absolutely, and it's very easy to formulate with because there's no taste whatsoever to the material. And there's so many clinical studies that have been done on Pepsin GI. A lot of them are focused on ulcers,
Right.
because in Japan, Pepsin GI is a medication. In the U.S., it's a dietary supplement, and there's some studies done on healthy population looking at reducing leaky gut or gut permeability. And I know what you're thinking. How are these done in healthy individuals if it's leaky gut and gut permeability?
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
no, I
but
get
but
it.
it was induced in the study.
Oh,
If you have uh, high levels of intense exercise, you're usually inducing leaky gut, which is why you sometimes see people who run marathons or triathletes have digestive issues. People who take NSAIDs, if you have aches and pains and you're taking Advil pretty consistently, you can be inducing leaky gut. And Pepsin GI has clinical studies to show that you're reducing that occurrence. So I think that would be based on the water activity, the ease of formulation. I think the combination of those ingredients, which are both relatively low dose, you could probably fit a full dose of each in a single capsule, or split it up twice a day, and you'd have a great combination ingredient.
no, that sounds like a great ingredient, great combination. Makes a great deal of sense. All right, so here's the last one, and I promise. What would be? It could be anything. Could be anything. What would be the advice of Dr. Dosz to people in general if you could tell them to do one thing to help improve the likelihood of a healthier life? What would be the one thing that you would recommend that they do?
I'm going to get away from the advertising for the company. Exercise.
Yes.
I would say exercise. Be physically active. You don't have to. I'm not telling you to go run a marathon. Go for a walk. Lift weights. Load bearing exercise as you get older. For bone density. For numerous reasons is a great thing. You don't have to start hot right out of the gates. Ease into it, but being physically active probably has one of the greatest impacts on extending your health span.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you live to be 100 if it's a terrible 100.
That's right.
You want to remain independent as long as you can. You don't want to need someone to open all the jars for you. And I think exercise is the best way to stay in that shape.
That's very good advice. So I would summarize it by saying you don't want to just add years to your life. You want to add life to your years, and exercise is a great way to do that.
That is a great way to put that.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Dosz, for just giving us so much incredible information about Butyragen. It gives me a number of ideas, and so I'm very, very pleased to have had this conversation. And thank you to our listeners for joining us. And, if you like what you heard, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks again for joining us, Dr. Dosz.
Thank you very much.
Okay. See y'all.